Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Out of Spec Guide. I'm Max. I'm joined today by Mr. Martin Lee of the EV News Daily podcast. Hello.
How you doing?
Doing well, Martin. So, the first time having you on, but basically, I thought you'd be a great guest for today because, well, it's not just because you're British and Mini is a British brand, but because you do a daily podcast about the world of EVs and EV news. You're on the Inside EVs podcast with Kyle as well. But I wanted to talk today about the Mini brand, which is, a British brand with a lot of heritage that has a sort of uncertain future ahead of them. And I thought we'd just start going over the history of Mini and what they actually mean and how this all relates to electric vehicles. Because believe it or not, while this is like a niche brand, they're actually strangely important, at least for BMW in the
Yeah.
history of electric adoption recently. So, do you want to get into it?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Do you want to start with, well, perhaps where the story began for Mini going electric, really, because we went to a history lesson, perhaps, of everything Mini, but it is a storied brand. It is one with plenty of history. And that is why I think there are so many fans around the world that love these cars, whether they love the original Minis that were genuinely Mini, or where the brand has become now. So, yeah, happy to start with the electric stuff if you want.
Absolutely. So I guess that begins with the Mini E, which they did. And as I understand it, this was basically a precursor to what became the BMW i3, right?
Yeah, so it's 15 years, I think 15 years this year, since the Mini E was first produced by Mini under the ownership of BMW. It was a pilot. It was a pilot to test the feasibility of electric vehicles. And it was all about kind of gathering that real world data. So they knew they wanted to do some electric stuff. And over the years, plenty of big car brands have done electric trials. So this one was 600. And so 600 vehicles were then leased. Now, not everybody could get one. You mentioned the Inside EVs podcast. Our friend Tom Malogney from State of Charge, he was one of the 600. I think he was the first in North America to get his Mini E. It was leased in the United States, United Kingdom, and Germany. The Mini E was based on the Cooper S. What they did was they took the internal combustion out and replaced the electric drivetrain into it. So 150 kilowatt electric motor, 201 horsepower, and 0 to 60 was, I think, less than 10, or 0 to 62 miles an hour. 0 to 100 Ks was less than 10 seconds, I think. So it wasn't, fire breathing, but it was good. And I think the battery was 34, 35 kilowatt hours. And so the range then, is different battery technology. And I'm not sure exactly what battery was inside it, but it was, around 100 miles of range, I think Tom has said. The battery, though, was in the back of the vehicle, so occupied where the rear seats would be. So this was the Mini E originally, the leased car was a two-seater. But as you say, Max, at the beginning, this was all about gathering data for BMW. So insights into how people like our friend Tom used it. And he's on the East Coast and he really did use it. He was, this is 15 years ago, early adopter. You're plugging into wall outlets, you're getting a charge wherever you can. He was spending twice as long to get where he wanted, knowing that he was at the forefront, the vanguard of the electric vehicle movement. And so what BMW were learning was, how people charge, where they charge, how long they're charging for, how they're driving the cars, and all of that was to shape BMW's electric future. And as you say, you mentioned the BMW i3 that would come in 2013. Ultimately, so much was learned from the Mini project that went into that. So yeah, Mini being electric does go back 15 years now, or even though it's a very different vehicle to what we now know as the electric Mini.
Yep, and that comes full circle because the guts of the i3, as I understand it, or at least a lot of the battery technology, the motors, some of the electrical packaging was adopted. And what we now know in the US, at least with the Mini SE, I know not sure what your market calls it, but the electric Mini we have today is oddly very similar to that original program, and strangely, in my opinion, not quite as modernized and competitive as the rest of the market.
Yeah, and certainly different to the BMW i3, which I don't know if they lost money on every one they sold, but that's space age technology. And the Mini was certainly a bit more straightforward. Yeah, I think you call it Mini Cooper SE. We call it Mini Electric, out in 2019. And that iconic design with an all electric powertrain is something that I think lots of people would go for and enjoy that vehicle in the right, the right place, the right setting, the right use case, 181 horsepower. I think a smaller battery in this than the than the original 600 cars. I think this is a 32 or 33 kilowatt hour battery pack, but the technology's moved on so much. At least here in Europe, WLTP is 145 miles on that. US EPA will be less. 0 to 62 miles now, again, just over 7 seconds, top speed of 93. So technology really coming along in that time from the original Mini E to what we have now. And for other, otherwise, it's just a very regular EV. It's got regen, it's got all the different driving modes. You got sport, mid mode, green, and green plus. It's got all the things that would come with a modern electric vehicle, as you say, based on all the learnings from that and the BMW i3 as well. So that's where we've got to. But I think, as you mentioned at the beginning, the future is looking really interesting.
It is, and I want to into that in just a minute, but also I want to comment on the modern Mini brand. I actually own like a current model Cooper S because I'm just leasing it, and I had the option of going gas or electric. I just didn't want to go electric yet because the range and the competitive offering for it being my only car at this point just wasn't there. And I will say one thing I think the Mini brand has always done well, especially like when they came to the States and BMW kind of co-opted it, is this marketing. I mean, here they've got the right like polar bear going on in the Mini SE. They always have a goofy, I think, fun brand personality. And I've always loved how it's one of the few brands that still exist on the road today where you can get a quirky, personalized car, right? It's not just another aerodynamic box. It's something unique. They let go crazy with the colors and the customization, including on the electric models with the cool socket style wheels and all of those. But getting into the future, there's a new Cooper that actually does look like it's going to get a little bit of a spec bump to power, but more importantly, I think battery capacity and range, hopefully also charging infrastructure. What are the details on this, Martyn?
Well, you're absolutely right in terms of how people love Mini. So I had a Mini Cooper from, I think, 2010, I think maybe for a year and a half or 2 years. And I just remember that vehicle being fun. So
Yeah,
I don't know if you find your vehicle, like, how you would describe it, but my memory of that, my overriding memory, it was a new car, so it was reliable, etc., etc. But it was fun. It just made me smile. It was
I
no
love
good
it.
for,
Yeah.
yeah, it was no good for family road trips. It was no good for piling weekend DIY projects in, but it felt like a roller skate. It was quite a big vehicle, and because minis keep growing, but it was just everything from the styling, particularly the interior and the switches, the switch gear, how it felt, the tactile nature of the switch gear, obviously the big central display as well. And it was just one of the best cars I've had. I think we ran it for a year and a half or 2 years, and I've just got really good memories of just that car made me smile. And so I think that is repeated millions of times around the world, which is why the brand is loved so much. But
Yeah.
going into an electric future, there's been some real uncertainty around it and where it will be made as well. So last year, we heard BMW say, we're moving production to China. So does anybody care that Mini, a British brand, not made in Great Britain? I don't know. They made all the news over here when they announced it last autumn. Now, I wonder, you have to, whenever big companies make these announcements, there's always an element of politics involved because since then, I believe the UK government then stepped up and there is now financial help to keep it here. So we heard the news as of recording this not so long ago, a few days, a couple of weeks, I think, that the electric Mini production is staying here. So the new electric Mini is going to be made in Great Britain at its Oxford plant. And that's been the primary production facility for Mini since 2001. About 5,000 electric Minis are made there at the minute. More than 11,000 have been made since 2019 of the current Mini EV. And choosing to stay in Oxford keeps that brand rooted in Great Britain with all of the UK automotive industry, the history and the heritage, etc., etc. But there is a lot of uncertainty surrounding things like Brexit. And it looks like we're going to head into a recession this year, but it will be not as deep as many people thought. So there's real challenges ahead. Why wouldn't you just move everything to China where everything's going to be cheaper to make? But they're going to upgrade the Oxford plant, improve it, enhance it, and ensure the future of that plant to make the next generation of the Mini, which, like I say, has been the current electric one made there since 2019. The 2024 Mini, which is coming, as you mentioned, and the Mini convertible electric version of that is also going to be made in Oxford too. And so I think we're really looking forward to seeing what Mini do next and where they make that and the specs of the next vehicle.
Yeah, I think Mini is kind of just one of the many symbols in our modern world of how globalized, in particular, the car industry is, right? Because here is a British brand with all of that heritage, owned by a German, giant, assembled, I guess, in the Oxfordshire plant, but also probably components made all over the world with this electric stuff and the Great Wall partnership between BMW and them. Probably a lot of Chinese components too, and research and development going on there. Because let's just face it, the Chinese are probably the most ahead when it comes to battery production at scale. So that's probably why BMW is making this logistics. But the future of Mini, particularly in the US, with the geopolitical situation, our tariffs, it's a little bit
Mm.
uncertain. But I guess maybe with the assembly there, that clears things up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I'd forgotten about all your tariffs, your import tariffs coming from China, and I forget about that because it affects so many goods. But as you say, it's a really important point in terms of the car industry and how many made here will end up on US soil. That waits. We wait to see. But the Mini Electric project has always been a little bit international because the original Mini E, which I mentioned at the start of the show, was they were made in Oxford, but without any of the powertrain. Those were then shipped, those 600 vehicles made in Great Britain, and then I think it was to Dusseldorf or wherever they went to Germany, and then they had all the electric bits added. So Mini and electric has already always been an international thing anyway, from the history of their electric projects. So yeah, we don't have a battery industry here, so we don't have a lot of automotive parts are made here, but so much is going to be brought in and then assembled here and then shipped out, which has been the challenge for the car industry because we have got a reasonable car industry. You've got Jaguar Land Rover, Ford have made some investments, but some cuts as well. The same as Stellantis, Nissan, of course, in the northeast of England, where the Nissan Leaf, one of three places the Nissan Leaf is made in the world, and the battery plant, which is literally over the road. You've got the Leaf made there. You've got a main road with actually a kind of a walkway over the top so staff can get, and then you've got the AESC battery plant on the other side as well, which is no longer solely owned by Nissan. But we do have a bit of a car industry here. Certainly not what it was. I think many people hark back to the past and wishing it could be the same. And it's a very popular thing for our politicians to say, "Oh, we're going to have gigafactories everywhere," but they don't know what that really means to implement. So, but we do, yes, it will be assembled. It will be assembled here from parts shipped from around the world.
Yeah, and I wonder what that means for the brand. Because if we just think about, like you were saying, the British car industry in general, Range Rover, we in the US, we love that brand. I don't think that's going anywhere. JLR is doing a good job managing that. Aston Martin, right? They've got a really competitive F1 sponsorship going on. They're doing well there. So I'm sure their brand's fine. There's still Bond movies that are going to come out. When it comes to Mini, though, like if you're a consumer, in our world today, it's a little weird because the current Mini, the one I'm driving, is derived from a chassis that was developed in 2014 or released initially in 2014 and is one of the longest running production cars still on the road. And these new electric ones, right, they're going to make the Cooper, the Countryman, which is their SUV, and then this thing called the Aceman that I'm not entirely sure what it is. But this new lineup, it seems more competitive, but do you think, Martin, is your spidey sense around this that it will be competitive, or what are you feeling here?
I think things like the Countryman, which will be a direct relation to the BMW iX1. I think those vehicles are wanted by families, and this is I think the challenge for the Mini brand going forward in an electric future is to reinvent itself a little bit to say, hey, we're family cars, because again, many people would have driven a Mini 10, 15, 20 years ago, and I made that joke, but they're not Mini anymore. And people may have seen them, but I think there is a job to do because the cars have got bigger. Say, oh, a BMW iX1, little mini crossover. You think, oh, okay, that'd be quite good for our family journeys. And then you say, but what about the Mini Countryman? And I think a lot of people would assume, well, a Mini is that it's not gonna be big enough. You know, even the word sounds like it's gonna be small. So there is an education job to do there with the cars getting bigger and moving into those segments. Where Mini can score really big, I think, is with character cars like the convertible. So the Countryman, not the sexiest car in the world. The BMW iX1 isn't, and that'll do a job for families and people that want that car. But with vehicles like the Mini convertible with all electric power, if they can market that correctly, then I think they're on to a winner with the brand, because the brand will become once again fun and kind of wind in your hair, smiles on your face, and that
Yeah.
can be a halo for everything else, I hope.
Yeah, and the car purist in me, it's funny because if you think about the Heritage of Mini, I don't really like the convertible model in particular. I love Clarkson's review of it on Top Gear from a while ago, where he's like, it's like always having a fat mate in the passenger seat because it's heavier than the actual hardtop. But that's besides the point. I'm a weird car enthusiast. For most people who think of Mini as just this fun motoring brand, right? I actually see these convertibles a lot as like rental vehicles. I think they have a lot of cachet among the mainstream, like you're saying, Martyn, as this fun factor. Even though we might think, oh, Countryman, that's what everyone's going to buy. Well, if the Countryman is just an iX1, wouldn't most people buy a BMW for the same price? Why do you want a Mini? Whereas if you think of Mini as a fun brand, then the brand and the proof in their pudding should be made in these fun products. And it seems all the more important that hopefully they get better than they are right now, because the current SE convertible, I suspect it's going to be a good rental fleet vehicle, maybe a good lease machine, but it's just not the kind of thing that I could imagine owning.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that they need to hook into what people think Mini stands for in an electric future, because simply putting the car on the market is not going to be good enough, because there's really compelling competition now. Not for a convertible, I'll admit that,
Yeah, true.
and they're not going to sell loads of them, but there are cars out there like the Fiat 500e. We
Yeah,
looked at the for my wife and I, we were looking at what two-car driveway do we have, and we've actually ended up at the minute with the Hyundai Kona and the MG ZS, two cars that are enormously similar. But at one point, we were going to go slightly smaller, because she just wants a small, nippy city car to do her chores, and we're going to have a slightly bigger car, or maybe an estate car, because I wanted to try out the new MG5 for 6 months or so. And in the end, we ended up with the two cars we've got at the minute. But we looked at the Fiat 500e La Prima version with the folding top, and that again just made us smile. And it was just,
yeah,
wow, this car is really expensive for what you get. But
yeah,
it's brilliant. It's got a nice, decent, what is it, 40 something kilowatt hour battery. The range is good enough. Way style over, substance. But actually, although it looks the same as the Fiat 500 that you know and love, this is on a dedicated new platform. They made it look the same, but it's designed from the ground up to be an electric vehicle. But yeah, very expensive. And this is the problem with the minis, is BMW want to charge a premium for them, but actually you've got to do something a bit special, a bit different to capture people's attention. So I think cars like the convertible, if they can hook in all the right marketing around it, like Fiat do with the 500e and the link to Italy and all the great things that we love Fiat for. If they can do that with Mini and maybe play on some of the Britishness around it, I don't know how they would do that, but have some fun with that. Those are the vehicles I believe that Mini are going to do well with, because you can charge a premium for them, because you're buying
yeah.
it, with your heart, not your head.
That's true. Mini already is a premium brand. People are used to paying a little bit more for something that maybe doesn't make as much practical sense, but really does put that smile on your face. My big question would be, there's such a missed opportunity here, because for years now, there hasn't been like a fun electric city car really since the absence of i3, at least in the States. I mean, you guys have gotten that 500e, the new one, for a little bit now. It's coming here, which is great, but you've had the what is it, the Kia Soul EV, the new one
Mm.
that we never got. So there's been this whole gap, especially in the US market, of these fun, small electric cars. And now Mini's decided, oh, we're going to come in now when everyone else is also joining the party. It's a little bit of an odd decision to me.
And cars like the MG4, which the MG4 is, you'd probably call it a compact car, but actually for many families on European roads, that would be their main family car. That's starting at £25,000 here,
Mm,
and that has got a very decent battery size. Yes, it's made in China by a Chinese car company, but the MG brand, linking that to
Yeah.
the Mini brand, people see it. And like I say, we own a ZS EV. We didn't buy it because of the MG badge. Although interestingly, my wife, who is not a car person, she recognized MG, and I said, it's made by SAIC in China. They bought the brand, they bought the IP. It's not MG, and she
Yeah.
said, yeah, it's fine because we live near an MG dealership, and so it's gone back twice to be warranted, and there was a leak and a sensor problem. No, absolutely fine, no problem. That was her criteria for buying the car, which was if it goes wrong, can I get it serviced? And I recognize MG. Someone like her, there's a Mini dealership near us as well. Someone like her would say, right, it's Mini. I know it. I love it. It's great. This is why SAIC entered the UK with MG, not their own brand. Very smart to own this because this brand is on fire in the UK right now.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They're selling so many of these MG4s, the ZSs, the MG5, which is the estate car, the wagon car. But this is, the MG4, really decent family car, decent size, full of tech. The app is good, nice and connected, big screens inside, feels high tech, and it starts at £25,000. And so, what's that? Like $28,000 or $30,000? That for that range and that battery, and it charges really quick. It's so compelling on a price basis that anyone who is gonna want to charge a little bit more, it's going to have to make it special, and you're going to have to live off that heritage Mini brand for a little bit longer. Certainly that, and I would play up. It's made in Oxford.
Yeah.
All of those things about, hey, you're buying a British car. Even if you have got to do the hackneyed thing of going back to the Italian job and all that kind of self-preservation society, you've got to evoke all of that.
Yeah.
Michael Caine stuff. If you got to do anything like that, just lean on the brand a little bit more, get people to pay more in an electric future for that, because there are some really, really compelling cars, not only coming from the Chinese, but other brands like Stellantis,
Yeah.
Renault, Nissan going smaller as well. And then Stellantis using the Jeep brand. And again, Jeep is nothing here,
Yeah.
which is interesting for US viewers. Yeah, we have Jeep. I forget how many hundreds they sold last year, but yeah, we have it. But Jeep means something. When you say to somebody, "Oh, I got a Jeep," that it in our heads, you thinking, okay, so you can go off road and you can go on a farm and you can get a country lane. It's 4-wheel drive. You're thinking of that classic Jeep shape, and so again, there's a brand that can charge a little bit more, and actually, I think they've got a good chance of doing it, but from much more of a standing start than Mini here anyway in Great Britain, because Jeep
Yeah.
don't sell anything. They'd sell something. I think there's a Grand Cherokee they sell. But so in an electric future, there is a massive opportunity for all of these competitors to BMW and Mini to make a step up. And that's going to be the challenge.
Absolutely, because on the heritage and the brand side, you've got Fiat competing now, and then, MG doesn't mean as much in the US, and I guess SAIC hasn't decided to compete here in our market for whichever reason, tariffs, or I'm not exactly sure. But when it comes to just practicality, right, I think you just recorded an episode on this the other day, ID2, right? Volkswagen's going to have a really affordable, small little hatchback for the US. So I think the time is now for them to strike. And I agree with you, Martyn. They really have to emphasize every strong element of this brand that's left, milk it, but also foster it further. I mean, I don't know, like what they can do, whether they can get Rihanna to drive a Mini or what they're going to do, but they've got to get something, I think, done to kind of keep this brand restored. I mean, they've done cool things in the last few years, like the LED Union Jack taillights, but I think BMW just needs to pull out every gimmick of the closet they can and give this brand some TLC, because in the US, at least, it feels like it's really just starting to get a little diluted.
And there's a larger problem with this as well, in that actually what's cool about Great Britain, and I'm proud of where I live,
Yeah.
but if you go back to the 1990s had whether you love your music. So, we had the Britpop era, which was Oasis and Blur and guitar
Radiohead.
bands.
Yeah.
And the other end of the scale, the Spice Girls, right? So, the 1990s had that cool Britannia thing going on. And then,
Mhm.
we lived off Cool Britannia for a long time. We really did play up, I guess, the 1960s and a lot of that. So Cool Britannia made us quite cool. And then just as that was kind of going and there was global recession, we had the Olympics in 2012 when the world spotlight was on us and we had James Bond jumping out of a helicopter after, seeing the Queen and her corgis and arriving at the Olympic Stadium. And of course, Minnie's on stage there and
Yeah.
lots of red, white, and blue and Union Jacks. And then there was this wonderful period after the Olympics when Great Britain was cool and we really showcased ourselves to the world. And what have we done? Since then, uh, we've we've had Brexit, so we've become a little more insular, a little more
Mhm.
inward looking, a little bit less part of a global community. Others would argue that it helps, etc., etc. But and then obviously the last few years we've all gone through things like lockdowns and what have you. But there is a larger thing at work here in that actually, if you want to play up the British thing, there's not so much going on right now. Even in the past, you've had the kind of tongue-in-cheek Austin Powers, like, yeah, baby. But you can still play on all of that, even though it was a joke. And so there's also a wider issue around as well with basing a brand here, which is, you know, as you mentioned, it's not Aston Martin, it's not 007, it's not
Mhm.
etc. etc. So there are real challenges.
Yeah, but I think as long as Mini exists, they kind of have to be British, right? Because if it's not, what's the point? It's just yet another brand under the arm of the BMW umbrella. So I don't know. I'm rooting for Mini. I still like my Mini. My gas Mini is really fun, and I would hope that there's some competitive electric offerings. But I'm glad that you're enjoying your ZS and all the great cars you guys get to have that we get to get a few years later, or maybe not at all. But anyhow, that's just my US jealousy with the cheap EV market, but it looks like things are getting interesting. And thanks so much for joining me today to talk
Pleasure.
Mini, Martin.
Loved it. Absolutely love it. Anytime.
Yeah, well, great to have you on. And for everyone watching, we'll see you next time on Out of Spec Guide. Let us know what kind of topics you'd like to see.